My back was cracking like a goddamn glow stick every time I shifted in my worn-out desk chair, the kind with that permanent squeak that sounded like it was protesting every bad decision I'd ever made. It was late October when the pain finally got so bad I couldn't fake it anymore, couldn't tough guy my way through a grocery run without breaking into a cold sweat halfway through the frozen food aisle. I'd been putting it off, blaming the mattress, blaming the chair, blaming age. But deep down, I knew what it was. The spine had given up on me the way people do when you stop being useful. No warning, no explanation. Just one day, it says, "That's enough," and you're left crawling. I'd been out of construction for over a year at that point, after a steel beam mishap that should have taken me out then and there. Miracle I didn't end up paralyzed. But it left me with a mess of ruptured discs, chronic pain, and a pile of bills tall enough to use as a nightstand. I'd switched to remote IT work, fixing printers for people too rich to learn how a restart works, barely scraping by on freelance gigs and heating pads. But the pain wasn't waiting around anymore. It had become my shadow. The surgery wasn't optional. 3 doctors, 2 MRIs, and a specialist named Linda with the deadest eyes I've ever seen all told me the same thing. If I didn't get under the knife soon, I'd be kissing mobility goodbye before 45. It wasn't cosmetic. It wasn't some maybe it'll help shot in the dark. It was a choice between debt and a wheelchair. And I'd already chosen enough wheelchairs for others in my time. So I did something I'd never done in over 40 years of being their son. I asked my parents for help. Not a gift. Not a blank check. Just a loan. A partial one at that. I had some savings, I had my credit cards maxed, sure, but they still swiped, and I had enough pride left to put that ask in a goddamn text message instead of calling them like a son should. I typed it out 5 times. Backspaced. Reread. Hit send. Waited. The reply came a few hours later, just before midnight. Short. Too short. We're just not in a position to help right now. Love you. That was it. No questions, no follow-up, no how bad is it, or can we work something out? Not even a damn sorry. Just not in a position. Like I was asking for bail money after torching a Taco Bell. I stared at that message for a long time. I don't even remember locking my phone. Just remember that hollow feeling in my gut that comes when you realize, really realize, you're on your own. Not metaphorically. Not in that poetic way. But really, truly, nobody's coming. A week later, I'm on Facebook, half-heartedly scrolling through political rants and dog photos, and then, there it is. A post from Ryan. My younger brother. The golden child. First condo. Thanks mom and dad, dream come true. With a dozen exclamation points and a gallery of high-res, perfectly lit photos. Him standing on a balcony, holding a champagne bottle. Our parents smiling beside him, holding up a giant novelty key like they'd just won a game show. Mom's caption, "We are so proud of our baby boy. Homeowner at last." I remember sitting there, just blinking. Not angry yet. Not sad. Just stunned. Like someone had poured cold water over me, but I hadn't felt it hit my skin yet. I clicked through every picture. Granite countertops. Brand new appliances. Fireplace. Fucking fireplace. I looked at those faces, my parents beaming, proud, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. Not once did it occur to them that their other son, the one with the broken spine and the hospital bills, might see that post. Might feel something. Might feel everything. And that's when it cracked. Not my back, my heart, my trust, whatever you want to call it. Something deep and final. Something that couldn't be fixed with a Hallmark card and an awkward family dinner. I didn't comment. I didn't text. I didn't say a single goddamn word. But something permanent shifted that day, like someone turned off a light I didn't know I'd left on all my life. And yeah, maybe I sound dramatic. Maybe this is just some midlife tantrum about parental attention. But let me ask you something, straight up. What would you do if your parents gave your brother a home after telling you they couldn't help keep you out of a wheelchair? Would you be the bigger person? Would you pretend it didn't matter? Or would you feel like I did, like everything you ever believed about fairness, about family, was a bad joke told too late? Because that's where I was. Sitting in my cold apartment, ice pack strapped to my back, watching my family celebrate someone else's victory with the money they told me they didn't have. I didn't cry. Not that night. Maybe not at all. There's a numbness that sets in when the people who are supposed to catch you drop you instead. A silence that screams louder than any fight ever could. I decided not to reply to them. Not for the surgery. Not for anything. They'd shown me what I was worth. They'd made their choice. And I'd make mine. No birthday calls. No holiday check-ins. No status updates. I ghosted them, fully, completely, without a word. Let them wonder. Let them stew. Because if they ever really cared, they'd already know what they did. But people like that, they don't think they've done anything wrong. They just think you're being dramatic, ungrateful, difficult. I knew the calls would start soon. The guilt, the half-baked apologies, the sudden concern. But I wasn't picking up. Not now. Maybe not ever. Because some things once broken don't get glued back together. They get buried. Quietly. Forever. After that Condo post, I didn't rage, I didn't cry, I didn't even drink, although God knows I wanted to tear through a bottle of something rough and mean just to numb the sting, but instead I did something worse. I went quiet. Not the kind of silence where people worry because they care, but the kind where they get uncomfortable because you stopped playing your role, and without their scapegoat or their invisible audience, they start to hear the echo of their own bullshit. I didn't text. I didn't call. I didn't show up to Thanksgiving. I ignored the calls when they came in, Mom once, then Ryan, then a long, awkward pause in contact, like they all got spooked when they realized I wasn't bending this time. Instead, I made the calls that mattered, to the hospital, to the billing department, to a second credit card company that shouldn't have given me another line but did. I cashed out the last of an old savings account I'd kept for emergencies, and let's be real, what's more of an emergency than your spine threatening to collapse like a condemned building every time you reach for a box of cereal? Surgery got scheduled for mid-November, a week before Thanksgiving, and I told no one. Not a soul. The day they were stuffing themselves with mashed potatoes and cranberry bullshit, I was waking up in a hospital bed with stitches in my back and morphine in my bloodstream, wondering why painkillers can't reach where it really hurts. Recovery was brutal. The pain didn't vanish, it just changed shape. From sharp stabs to a dull roar, from lightning bolts to constant buzzing, but the real ache, the one they don't warn you about, was realizing that I went through all of it, every humiliating moment, completely alone. No one sat in the waiting room. No one brought soup. No one called to say, "We're proud of you." I watched the nurse's face when she asked, "Anyone here with you?" and the awkward way she tried to smile when I said, "Nope, just me." But it wasn't just the loneliness, it was the pretending. That's what pissed me off the most. Ryan started texting a week after the surgery. Not anything meaningful, just those lazy, throwaway lines guys use when they want to check a box without doing the work. "Yo bro, you good?" Like we were still in college. Like I hadn't just been cut open and stapled shut by strangers while he was probably popping champagne in his brand new kitchen. He didn't ask how the surgery went. Didn't say he heard about it from Mom and Dad. Didn't say a damn thing that suggested he understood what had happened. Just yo bro, like we were still those dumb kids riding our bikes down the hill behind the elementary school, racing toward a tree we were too stupid to brake for. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the message. Let it sit there like a ghost on my screen, unread and unwelcome. I deleted the Facebook app, muted the group chats, told my therapist, when I finally got around to seeing one, that I was experimenting with disappearing. She didn't laugh, just nodded and said, "Sometimes that's a survival tactic." And it's funny, in the silence, all the noise of my childhood came back clearer than ever. Like echoes getting louder with distance. I remembered every time I picked up Ryan from school because Mom forgot. Every time I lied to cover for him because he was having a hard time. I remembered that birthday when I turned 15 and Mom gave me socks while Ryan, who had crashed Dad's car a week earlier, got a new skateboard just to cheer him up. I remembered Dad patting me on the back after I got my first construction gig and saying, "You're the steady one, Ethan. We never have to worry about you." And that was supposed to be a compliment. That was the role I was cast in, the responsible one, the one who never needed much, the one who could take a hit and smile through it. Ryan? He was the spark. The entertainer. The golden boy with the crooked grin and the ability to fail upward. Every time he screwed up, they circled the wagons, made excuses, threw money at the problem. I watched him coast from job to job, girl to girl, always landing on his feet while I broke mine trying to hold the family up. So no, I didn't respond. Because I knew what that text meant. It meant they were testing the waters, seeing if I'd come around, if I'd break first. But I didn't. Not this time. I kept quiet. I healed slowly, took short walks, stared at my ceiling fan until I started naming the blades. And I waited for the next move because I knew there'd be one. It came in the form of a letter. An actual letter. Handwritten, stamped, with my name on the envelope in Mom's cursive I hadn't seen since birthday cards when I was still young enough to get excited about glitter glue. I let it sit on the kitchen table for 2 full days before opening it. Something about it felt heavy, like it carried not just words, but weight, the weight of everything they hadn't said. Inside, it was exactly what I expected and somehow worse. Mom said they'd been thinking about me a lot. Said they were worried sick. Said Dad had been quiet, not himself, and wished he could take it back. But she never said what it was. Never wrote the word condo. Never mentioned the money. Never acknowledged the fact that I had gone under the knife without so much as a good luck from either of them. It was a letter full of smoke signals with no fire. Guilt without apology. Concern without accountability. I read it once. Then again. Then I put it back in the envelope and shoved it in a drawer. I didn't throw it out. I don't know why. Maybe part of me wanted to believe they meant it. Maybe part of me just needed proof that they could say something, even if it was the wrong thing. But I wasn't ready to answer. Because here's the thing no one tells you about ghosting your family. It's not about punishment. It's about preservation. When the people who raised you can't see you bleeding, or worse, see it and look away, you learn to stitch yourself up in silence. Not because you don't want love, but because you finally understand the cost of begging for it. And I was done paying. I had always assumed Ryan at least paid something toward that condo, some token down payment, maybe a loan co-signed with Dad, or a family-friendly mortgage arrangement, the kind of deal parents offer when they still want to maintain a shred of plausible fairness. But I couldn't shake the curiosity, that gnawing itch in the back of my mind whispering that something didn't add up. So I asked around. Called an old friend of mine who still worked in real estate and knew how to navigate property records. Gave him the address I'd pulled from one of Ryan's stupid Facebook geotags. Within an hour, he sent me a link. One click, and there it was in black and white, deed registered under Ryan's name. Purchased in full, no lien, no mortgage, no financing. Just a straight-up cash buy. A gift. A 6-figure goddamn gift. They didn't just help him. They handed him a life raft while I was drowning and told me to tread water harder. I sat there on my couch, back still sore from surgery, reading and rereading those numbers, those signatures, the date on the paperwork a full 3 weeks before I'd asked them for help. So not only had they made their decision, they'd made it long before I even came to them. They'd watched me flounder, fold in on myself, ask for help, and decided to lie to my face instead. No guilt. No hesitation. Just a cold, polished, not in a position while they were wiring money for a man cave and high-end fixtures. I thought the betrayal would hit all at once like a punch, something sharp and immediate, but instead it came like a slow wave of nausea, a sick heat rising in my chest, then sinking into my stomach where it sat like a brick. I didn't scream, didn't call, just sat there with the blinds shut, the TV off, my phone buzzing every so often with more of Ryan's pointless, surface-level texts. The kind of messages that smell like guilt but are wrapped in the disguise of normalcy. You watching the game? Mom made chili. Come by sometime. All of it like tossing pebbles at a window you already broke. I didn't respond. But I kept the phone close. The letter from Mom, the one that had arrived 2 weeks ago, sat on my desk, still unopened. I hadn't forgotten it, just ignored it, the way you ignore a headache when you've got worse pain elsewhere. But after seeing the condo info, after having the final confirmation that I'd been cut out long before I ever had a chance to speak, I figured I owed it to myself to at least read what she had to say. I opened it slowly, like peeling the skin off something rotten, afraid of what I might find underneath. It started the way I expected, soft apologies disguised as concern, vague references to not knowing you were struggling so much, which was complete bullshit considering I'd literally told them I needed surgery or risked permanent damage. She wrote that Dad had been quiet lately, not sleeping well, that Ryan missed me and hoped I was doing okay. All vague, emotional fluff, the kind of language that's meant to sound caring while never actually saying anything of substance. And then, near the end, it hit. He's been having chest pains, she wrote. He thinks it might be his heart. He won't go to the doctor, says it's nothing, but I think he's scared. We both are. There it was. The bomb. Not a direct plea, not an outright cry for help, but the classic family tactic, fear as leverage. Guilt with a side of desperation. Because if the betrayal hadn't moved me, maybe mortality would. Maybe the idea of Dad dying without us speaking would rattle something loose in me, would make me cave, would drag me back into the fold like a dutiful son. And maybe it did rattle me, but not in the way they wanted. Because what kind of father lets his son suffer in silence, says nothing, offers nothing, and then asks for connection only when he's the one who might be sick? Where was that fear when I was limping across the kitchen to heat up soup with a heating pad strapped to my lower back? Where was that love when they told me they couldn't help while signing over a condo to the son who'd never had to ask? You don't get to play the cancer card after you've folded on every other hand. You don't get to pretend this is about family now that you're afraid. And yeah, I know how that sounds. I know some people reading this will think I'm cruel, that I'm holding on to bitterness instead of seizing the chance to reconnect before it's too late. But if he was really dying, if this was truly the end, wouldn't he have done something? Said something? Wouldn't he have reached out himself instead of letting Mom write the guilt letter? Old wounds whisper louder than new fears. And mine were practically screaming. So I sat at my kitchen table, letter laid out in front of me, phone in hand, and typed a message that I knew would land like a slap, not because it was mean, but because it told the truth. 4 words. Just 4. Glad Ryan has help. I hit send. No explanation. No follow-up. Just that. And then I locked my phone and went for a walk, even though every step still hurt like hell. Because I'd rather limp forward on my own than crawl back into a house where love had conditions and loyalty was a one-way street. The thing about silence is that people always think it's passive, like you're sitting in a dark room somewhere waiting for someone to knock. But silence, when it's intentional, when it's sharp, is an action all its own. Silence carves through the air, sends messages louder than words ever could, and my silence, following that forward text, hit its target like a thrown hammer. I didn't hear anything for 2 days, and then my phone started ringing. First it was Ryan. I let it ring. Then it was Ryan again. Then once more. On the 4th try, I answered, not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted to hear what kind of script he'd be reading from this time. He jumped right into it, didn't even say hello properly, just said, "Dude, what the hell? Mom's been crying nonstop. Dad's not sleeping. They're freaking out, man." I leaned back in my chair and let the words roll over me like smoke from a fire I didn't start. Ryan went on, talking fast, filling the air with that familiar brand of deflection and vague urgency. "Look, I didn't know they said no to you. I swear I didn't. I thought you had it covered. I thought you were fine. You never said anything." He said it like we hadn't grown up in the same house, like he hadn't spent his whole life watching me eat my feelings and swallow my needs because someone had to be the grown-up. I told him I didn't want to talk about it. That was the exact phrase. I don't want to talk about it, Ryan. But he kept going, kept trying to patch things with phrases that didn't mean anything. They were just trying to help me out. It's not like they don't care. You're being really harsh, man. I sat there on the other end, quiet, listening, remembering a birthday I had when I was 9. Mom had promised a party. She'd even let me pick out a theme, dinosaurs. I'd been so excited I didn't sleep the night before. But the morning of, Ryan fell off his bike and broke his arm. And, just like that, everything shifted. Party canceled. Cake forgotten. Guests told not to come. I spent that night eating the corner piece of a half-frosted cake while Ryan got to sleep in Mom and Dad's bed with cartoons on the portable TV. It wasn't his fault, not directly, but that was the first moment I learned that my needs were optional, easily postponed, easily erased. I hung up the call without saying goodbye. I didn't need an ending, just an exit. And after that, I finally did something I should have done years ago. I found a therapist. Her name was Jules, mid-50s, silver hair pulled into a loose bun, and eyes that didn't blink too fast when I told her I hadn't spoken to my parents in months. She didn't nod mechanically like she'd heard it all before. She just sat with it. Let the silence do its work. The first few sessions were like trying to punch underwater, slow, ineffective, exhausting. I'd talk about the surgery, about Ryan, about the money, but it always circled back to one thing: why I still felt guilty for walking away from people who had already walked away from me 100 times before. At one point, maybe 3 or 4 sessions in, Jules leaned forward and said, "Sometimes not going back is the only way forward." And the sentence landed like it had weight, like she'd just dropped an anchor in the middle of my chest. I nodded but didn't say anything. Later, as I was leaving, she stopped me and asked one more question. "If you saw them again, what would you want to say?" I paused at the door, hand on the knob, and for a split second I imagined it, the hospital hallway, the cold plastic chairs, the smell of antiseptic, and my father in a bed hooked up to monitors. Would I yell? Would I cry? Would I say nothing at all? I didn't answer her. Not out loud. But I carried the question with me for days. That night, I walked into my kitchen and stared at the drawer with Mom's letter in it. I pulled it out, read it again, slowly this time, searching for honesty in the spaces between her words. There wasn't much. Just the usual layered guilt and careful omissions. But what hit me harder than the letter was what came next. My phone buzzed at just after 10. Unknown number. I didn't answer, figured it was another spammer, but a voicemail came through. I let it sit for a minute, then played it. It was my dad. His voice was lower than I remembered, like gravel under a boot, shaky in a way that didn't sound rehearsed. He started by saying my name, just my name, like he wasn't sure if I'd still respond to it. Then he said, "I wasn't a good father. I know that now. But I'm still your father." There was a long pause after that, like he'd run out of air or courage or both. Then he said, "I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know if it can be fixed." But I didn't want to go without saying something. "I'm sorry, Ethan. For everything." And then it ended. No goodbye. No, call me back. Just silence. The kind of silence that says more than anything else ever could. On the morning of my 43rd birthday, I woke up to the sound of wind scratching at my window, one of those dry Colorado mornings where the sun looks warm, but the air still bites at your skin like it's punishing you for getting out of bed. I hadn't told anyone it was my birthday. Not a friend, not a colleague, not even Jules, my therapist. The idea of celebration felt absurd, like lighting candles in a burning house. I had planned to treat it like any other Tuesday, maybe walk a little farther than usual, maybe order better takeout than I usually allowed myself. But I didn't expect anything. Not a call, not a text, definitely not a card. It showed up around noon in one of those stiff white envelopes with that cheap gold foil cursive printed on the outside, "Happy birthday, son." No return address, but I didn't need one. I knew that handwriting. I could pick out my mother's script from a pile of ransom notes. It was smooth and rounded, a little shaky now from age or guilt, who knows, but still hers. I brought it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at it like it might hiss if I opened it. Part of me wanted to toss it in the trash unopened, like I'd done with their Christmas card last year, the one that arrived a month late and 2 years too early. But this time I opened it. Inside was a folded card with a watercolor lighthouse on the front and a $100 bill tucked neatly inside like a pressed flower. No message. No love, Mom and Dad. Just the default Hallmark message printed in neat black ink, something vague about wishing you strength and joy in the year ahead. No acknowledgement of the silence between us, the voicemail I still hadn't responded to, or the hospital bed they'd never seen me in. Just money, and not even enough to insult me properly. $100. Like tossing a coin into a wishing well and pretending the water was deep enough to swallow the weight of everything they never said. I stared at the money for a long time, then at the card, then at the envelope with my name in that delicate cursive. My fingers felt too heavy to move, like they belonged to someone else. I reached for the card slowly, like I was disarming a landmine, and tore it in half. Not quickly, deliberately. A slow, clean tear right through the middle of the lighthouse, like splitting open the facade of someone else's idea of hope. Then I tore it again and again until the pieces were small enough to forget. I didn't touch the money. I left it sitting on the table like a dead insect, lifeless and meaningless. That card wasn't a gift. It wasn't even a peace offering. It was a transaction. A subtle, cowardly attempt to buy silence, to toss something shiny in my direction and hope I'd take the bait. But love isn't folded in half and stuffed into cheap paper. It's not thrown across a canyon you dug yourself. That card wasn't about love. It was about control. About guilt. About maintaining some pathetic illusion that we were still family, still bound together by something other than shared blood and shared blame. Later that afternoon, I made the mistake of checking Facebook, not out of interest, but out of habit. I hadn't deleted it yet, hadn't fully committed to vanishing from the parts of their world where I was still expected to quietly exist. And there it was, right at the top of my feed, like it had been waiting for me. A photo posted by Ryan, him, Mom, and Dad at a restaurant somewhere with too much sunlight and too little soul. A caption that read, "Sunday brunch with the best people in the world." Smiling faces, mimosa glasses, a plate of eggs Benedict the First wouldn't have eaten even if you paid me, and not a single mention that anyone else ever existed. No empty chair, no awkward space in the photo. Just them, their version of family, their carefully cropped reality. And I realized then, probably more clearly than ever before, that they had already moved on. Or maybe they never thought I left. Maybe they thought I'd circle back eventually, tail tucked, voice low, asking to be let back in like some stray mutt they forgot to feed. But I wasn't lost. I'd walked away. On purpose. With my eyes wide open. That night in therapy, I told Jules about the card. About the money. About how $100 felt more like a slap than a gift. She didn't interrupt. Just watched me as I talked, her hands folded gently in her lap. When I stopped, she leaned forward slightly and asked one question, quiet but heavy enough to knock the wind out of me. "Do you want revenge or peace?" I stared at her. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because the question itself forced me to look at the wound instead of the scab. For so long, I'd operated under the illusion that the two could coexist, that I could punish them with my absence and still somehow find serenity on the other side. But maybe that wasn't true. Maybe peace meant letting go, not just of them, but of what they owed me. And maybe revenge wasn't shouting or showing up. Maybe it was disappearing so completely they had no one left to apologize to. I didn't answer her right away. Just sat there in that quiet little room with its fake plant in the corner and the ticking clock on the wall. I thought about that card. About Ryan's brunch post. About the voicemail from my father, still sitting saved on my phone, still waiting for a response that might never come. I thought about how easy it would be to burn the bridge entirely, to block their numbers, sell my story to anyone who'd listen, make it clear I was done. But the truth is, I didn't want to hurt them. I just didn't want to be hurt by them anymore. It had been weeks since the birthday card incident, and although I hadn't expected much from it, part of me had still been chewing on the sour taste it left in my mouth, like something rotten you bit into thinking it was sweet. I hadn't spoken to Ryan since that pitiful series of texts, and I'd kept ignoring Mom's attempts to leave voice messages that danced around apologies without ever stepping into the light. Dad hadn't tried again, or maybe he had and just realized silence was safer than facing the version of himself he might meet on the other end of my phone. But that night, long after I should have gone to bed, after I'd tried reading a book and pacing the apartment, and even stood in the cold outside on my little cracked balcony, just listening to the wind cut between the buildings, I gave in to the thing clawing at my chest. The need to ask one damn question. I didn't rehearse what I was going to say. I didn't plan to yell or lay into him or force him into some kind of brotherly confession. I just wanted one piece of the puzzle to slide into place. So I called him, first time in over a year that I dialed his number instead of just deleting the notification when he reached out. He picked up on the third ring, his voice groggy, like he'd been sleeping or pretending to. "Ethan," he said, and it landed like a stone in a still pond. "Yeah," I replied, flat, emotionless. "I need to ask you something." There was a pause, like he was bracing for some kind of ambush, and then he muttered a cautious, "Okay." I didn't bother with preamble. I didn't explain the context or try to soften the blow. I just said it plainly. "Did you know they said no to me before they said yes to you?" The line went so quiet I thought he'd hung up. Then came the sigh, long and messy, the kind of exhale that buys time instead of giving answers. Man, I didn't know it was like that. I didn't know the timing. I don't know. Maybe I heard something, but I didn't think. I cut him off before he could finish that slippery sentence. "No, don't give me that. I'm not calling for your excuses. I want the truth. Did you know they lied to me? Did you know they told me they couldn't help while they were signing over a fucking condo to you?" He hesitated, then fell back on the oldest trick in the family playbook. "I didn't want to get in the middle of it, Ethan." That sentence broke something in me I didn't realize was still holding together. Because that's what it had always been, hadn't it? Ryan, never in the middle. Always the golden boy standing off to the side while I held up the ceiling, cleaned up the mess, explained away the problems. He was never in the middle because we all made sure he wasn't. And now he wanted to pretend he hadn't known the weight of the scale was tilted in his favor. "Well, congratulations," I said, voice shaking despite how calm I thought I'd be. "You made it through another disaster without ever getting your hands dirty." That's when I told him everything, not because I needed sympathy, but because someone in that damn family was going to hear the truth whether they wanted to or not. I told him about the surgery, about waking up alone, about the bills, the panic attacks, the nights I couldn't sleep because the pain in my back was screaming louder than the silence in my apartment. I told him about Mom's card with $100 bill and how it felt like a bribe from a stranger who didn't know me anymore. I told him about Dad's voicemail and how too little too late doesn't even begin to describe the hollow pit it left behind. Ryan didn't interrupt. Maybe he was stunned. Maybe he was actually listening for once in his life. And when I was finished, when I'd emptied everything into that call like a confession whispered into a storm, he finally said something. And it was the one thing I wasn't ready for. "Maybe they just thought you didn't need them like I did." At first, I didn't understand. Then it hit me like a second injury layered on top of an old wound. That was the difference, wasn't it? That's why they gave him the condo and not the loan. That's why they showed up for him, but never for me. Because they saw me as the strong one, the independent one, the one who never needed help even when he was begging for it. I was the dependable son. The one they didn't have to worry about. And in their eyes, that meant I didn't deserve to be worried about. They didn't think I needed them. That single thought unraveled years of quiet rage, and what was left underneath it wasn't anger anymore. It was exhaustion. A bone-deep weariness that no therapy or surgery could fix. I'd spent years breaking my back for a family that only saw me when they needed a solid wall to lean on. And when I finally cracked, they treated it like an inconvenience, something to ignore, cover up, or buy off. So I didn't argue with Ryan. I didn't scream. I didn't explain how that sentence felt like the cruelest kind of compliment. I just whispered, "Thanks for answering," and hung up the call. Then I blocked his number. Not out of hate, not out of spite, but because the bridge wasn't burned, it was buried. And I had no desire to dig it up. The snow started falling just after sunset, quiet and steady, like the sky was finally tired of pretending to hold itself together. I watched it from the living room window, the kind of heavy snow that muffles the world and makes even the ugliest neighborhoods look clean for a while. The streetlights cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and the only sounds I could hear were the hum of the radiator and the occasional rustle of tree branches brushing against the window glass. Christmas Eve used to mean something, not joy necessarily, but noise, tradition, movement, obligation. Now it meant quiet, and for the first time in my life, that wasn't a bad thing. I hadn't made plans. I hadn't accepted invites from coworkers or joined any virtual holiday happy hours. I didn't feel sorry for myself, didn't pour a drink or scroll through old texts looking for someone to save me from the silence. I'd bought myself a decent dinner, a steak, some roasted potatoes, a bottle of red wine I'd never usually spend that much on, and I ate it alone, slowly, savoring it like an act of rebellion. No calls came. No texts. Nothing from Mom. Nothing from Ryan. I knew I had officially become the unspoken absence in their little curated narrative, the part of the story you skip over when retelling it to company. And that was fine. That was better than being dragged into the performance. After dinner, I pulled out an old notebook, one of the cheap kind with the cardboard covers and the college-rolled lines that always remind me of high school. I hadn't planned to write anything, but something in me itched to put things somewhere that wasn't inside my head. Not a journal. Not a record. Just a letter. Not for them. For me. For the boy I used to be. I wrote slowly, carefully, the way you do when you know the person you're talking to might not be listening, but you need to say it anyway. I started with "Hey kid" because calling him me felt too close. I told him about the couch he used to wait on, the way he sat every other Saturday with his backpack packed, shoes on, staring at the door like it would swing open any second. How he waited for a knock that never came, for headlights that never turned into the driveway, for a father who said he'd come and didn't. Again, and again, and again. I told him it wasn't his fault. That no matter how many times they let him down, it wasn't because he was hard to love. It wasn't because he was too quiet or too needy or too anything. It was because people sometimes don't know how to show up, and they teach you that you should apologize for needing them. I told him he would grow up and become someone strong not because he had no choice, but because he refused to break in the places they expected him to. I told him that one day he'd stop waiting, not out of bitterness, but because he finally realized the waiting itself was a kind of trap. And then I closed the notebook and placed it face down on the coffee table, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Not happy, not healed, but unburdened. I sat there for a long while, no music, no television, just the distant hush of snow outside and the creaks of an old apartment settling into the cold. It was peaceful in a way that used to scare me, because when you're used to being hurt, peace feels suspicious. Like something bad must be coming to balance it out. And maybe it was. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed on the end table, breaking the stillness like a crack in glass. I stared at it, already knowing who it would be before I picked it up. 3 words flashed on the screen from a number I hadn't blocked, though I couldn't tell you why. It was Mom. "He's in surgery." That's all it said. No greeting. No punctuation. No explanation. Just a sentence short enough to scream and soft enough to beg. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the message, not clicking it, not responding, just holding it in my hands like it might burn me. There were no follow-ups, no missed calls, no pleas. Just those 3 words, cold and plain, and soaked with 100 things she didn't say. I didn't move. I didn't breathe deeply. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel the things I probably should have felt. I just sat there, completely still, as the snow kept falling outside, and the clock on the wall ticked on like none of this mattered. He's in surgery. And I didn't know if that meant emergency or elective, if he was going to die or just scared for the first time in his life, if this was another manipulation or a genuine moment of mortality that had stripped everything else away. I didn't know what hospital he was in. I didn't know if Ryan was there, pacing in some sterile hallway, or if Mom had typed those words in a waiting room lit by the green glow of machines beeping behind her. I didn't know anything, and that was the part that hurt the most, not knowing if I even wanted to know. Because maybe it wasn't about whether he lived or died. Maybe it was about whether I could still live with myself for not going, for not responding, for not forgiving. And yet, I still didn't move. The car engine purred low, that dull humming rhythm filling the silence as I sat parked outside the hospital, watching the main entrance through the fogged windshield while the wipers scraped in slow, uncertain arcs across the glass. It was early morning, still dark, the kind of black sky that sits heavy on your chest and makes the whole world feel like it's holding its breath. I hadn't planned to come here, hadn't even gotten dressed like someone with intention. I just found myself in the car, jacket thrown over my shoulders, keys in hand, like my body had taken over and decided it needed one last look before making up its mind. I hadn't slept. The message, those 3 words, "He's in surgery," played on a loop in my head, not as a warning, not even as a plea, but as a question I still didn't know how to answer. Every mile I drove felt like another argument unfolding inside me. One voice said, "He's your father," and the other snapped back, "And what were you to him?" One said, "This is your last chance," and the other asked, "To do what, perform?" I could see the sliding glass doors of the emergency entrance from where I sat, nurses coming and going under the flickering fluorescent glow, bundled families walking in with worry on their faces and coffee in their hands. And somewhere inside that place was the man who raised me and also didn't, the man who taught me to mow the lawn before he taught me how to speak my truth, who handed out lectures instead of love and disappeared when it counted most. Somewhere inside, he was lying on a table or recovering in a sterile room, perhaps unconscious, perhaps awake and wondering if I would come. And still, I didn't get out. I gripped the wheel and stared straight ahead, thinking not about my dad in a hospital bed, but about myself, years ago, sitting on that goddamn couch with my backpack beside me, waiting for him to show up for his weekend. Thinking about every single time I was told to be the bigger person, every moment I was guilted into silence, because I was stronger, because I was older, because Ryan had a harder time with things. I thought about the surgery, the days I couldn't stand without wincing, the hours I spent alone learning to walk again while they posted brunch photos and congratulated themselves on raising a homeowner. I thought about how many versions of me had already bled for this family, the child, the teenager, the adult, each one giving a little more just to keep the illusion alive, the illusion that family means loyalty, that blood equals obligation, that forgiveness is a currency and I was forever in debt. And then I asked myself the only question that mattered. Would they be sorry I didn't come, or just relieved that I showed up? Would they actually feel remorse, the kind that changes a person from the inside out, or would they just wipe their brow and say, "Thank God he's still playing his part"? I knew the answer before I even finished the thought. So I didn't move. I didn't kill the engine. I didn't look at my reflection in the mirror or imagine how I'd explain this to someone who didn't understand. I just reached for my phone, opened the message thread, still blinking unread from my mother, and tapped out the only words I had left in me. I wish him peace. But I don't owe this family my body, my silence, or my suffering anymore. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bitter. It was the cleanest sentence I'd ever written, an exhale that had taken me a lifetime to release. And once I hit send, I went through my contacts and did what I should have done months ago. I blocked them. All of them. Ryan, Mom, Even the landline number from their house, the one I memorized as a kid when I used to call home from the school payphone because I'd missed the bus. I erased every digital rope they might use to pull me back into their orbit, every weak excuse they'd use to test if I was still breakable. Because I wasn't. Maybe people will say I should have gone in. That I should have forgiven. That I should have stood by his bed and said goodbye, even if it meant swallowing everything I'd fought so hard to finally spit out. But those people never had to watch love be distributed like rations. One spoonful for me, the whole pot for my brother. Those people never had to sit across from parents who only reached for you when they needed something to hold on to. Those people don't understand that sometimes not going back is the only form of self-respect you have left. I didn't leave right away. I just sat there, hands still on the wheel, eyes on the hospital entrance, letting the weight of the choice settle in. And when the sun finally began to rise, casting a dull orange glow across the pavement, I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel triumph. I felt stillness, the kind you earn when you've finally stopped bleeding for people who don't know how to stop cutting. I pulled away from the curb slowly, turned the corner, and drove into the morning. Not toward anything, not away from it either, just forward. No answers, no final scene, no reconciliation. Just me, in my own car, in my own life, on my own path. And that was enough. For the first time, it was more than enough.